Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this fireside chat on inbox integrity, how to stay compliant, healthy, and heard in 2026. My name is Kristen Bell. I'm the product marketing manager here at Everflow. And joining me today, we do have Tom Wozniak, the Chief Operations Officer at Optismo. We do want to start off with a poll just to get everyone's fingers warmed up and everyone ready to get engaged. And so the question we have for you is, what is your single biggest email headache right now? And while we wait for those answers to come up, I do want to give Tom a moment to introduce himself, tell us a little bit about his background and his expertise. So, Tom?
Ooh, boy. Well, thanks, Kristen. Great to be here. Thanks for having me on. Always fun to work with you and the folks at Everflow. We love you guys as partners. And so Tom Wozniak, as you said, COO of Optismo. I guess the kind of where I'm from and who I am and what I do and all the things. I've been in digital marketing since, I'll say, almost the beginning, the early to mid 1990s, and worked my first .com before 2000. So I got a chance to see the bubble, that first bubble burst. That was fun. But I've been in then email marketing on and off that entire time. So I've been doing this for a couple of decades plus, and most recently been with Optismo now for going on 9 years in roles in marketing and operations, and obviously involved in all things compliance, since that's our reason for being.
Mm-hmm. And how long have you been at Optismo now?
It's this in 2026, it'll be 9 years.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. Almost a decade.
I know, right? Yeah, that's kind of crazy. And it seemed like it's one of those where, it's both, it feels like a long time, but it's also just gone by in like a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I feel like you've seen so many things change over just these past 9 years.
Absolutely. I know we were talking about just how things change, as we were getting ready to go live. And just in our industry, boy, it's, the term back in the day when I first got into affiliate marketing back in around 05, 06, the common sense wisdom was, wait 6 months and everything's going to be different. Whatever offers are just going crazy right now, in 6 months they're gone and there'll be something new to replace it. And we saw things like, I remember when ringtones was just like that. Like, can you imagine? I mean, most people today be like, especially younger generation, like, what is a ringtone exactly and why would I buy one? But there was a time when that was just, people were printing money selling ringtones. And so we saw that, rode that wave with an affiliate network I worked for back in the day. But, just to see the speed at which it changes has done nothing but accelerate. Mm-hmm. And now we have things like AI to, contend with in the years ahead. That's just going to make that change even faster. So fascinating times to be in really any industry, but certainly the digital marketing and affiliate marketing space.
Yeah, from ringtones to AI is quite the leap.
But it didn't seem that long ago. That's the funny thing. I mean, I know, it's 20 years, but it doesn't feel 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. As we continue to have some of these answers roll in, I think we can just jump right to a relevant question to the poll. The first one I have for you is, at Optismo, you have so much visibility into the different campaigns. What are the most common preventable mistakes that you see sophisticated marketers make regarding their list health that accidentally actually take their deliverability?
Yeah, and it really applies to all email marketers. But, first and foremost, I think the biggest mistake you could make is in some way messing up the suppression process and finding yourself not compliant. If you, for example, don't suppress your opt-outs. Now, fortunately, this doesn't happen very often. In sophisticated marketers, that is, for many of them, largely, I want to call it kind of automatic, but oftentimes it is. But in cases where you're, marketing offers for a third party and you're going to need to download a suppression file and then make sure you cleanse against it, there's definitely a step. And so if there is one step that is so critical that you just can't miss it, that's really it. Because sending to, say, or forgetting to send to a suppression file and mistakenly emailing a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of email addresses who've opted out, yeah, that's a way to tank your business. if it draws the attention of the FTC and other legal entities. So that would be the biggest mistake that you can't make it. That's table stakes kind of stuff. But again, doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
I think it's the more likely things are. I think marketers we get in a rut, like we all do in our day-to-day work. And at a point we stop thinking outside the box and we just sort of go through the motions, but a little bit of that, you certain things just, you can do them without giving a whole lot of thought to it. And I think that's in email, that can be a recipe for bad results. If you aren't, say, validating, verifying your list on a regular basis, if you aren't taking additional steps of really looking at the data you have and making sure you're using it to its fullest potential. All of those things can get you into trouble and just depress results, if nothing else. You're certainly not optimizing to the greatest degree at that point. And then from a sending standpoint, if you're not staying on top of what's going on in the industry, and maybe you don't notice or become aware when, say, Gmail or Yahoo changes requirements for bulk senders, and all of a sudden something that yesterday was okay, and now, they'll generally give you a grace period, but in a sense, yesterday was fine, today you have a new rule to follow. If you're not following that rule, you may suddenly find yourself, or at least sometime down the road, you're not in the inbox anymore. And those are mistakes that are really easy to make.
Yeah. When you talk about people kind of not making any changes to their strategy, it makes me think like email engagement is not a blanket type of thing. So you do want to make sure that you're looking at the data, like you said, to really like fine tune that strategy. But you mentioned like the threshold for big companies like Yahoo. So they did have like a 0.3% spam threshold. And so I'm curious to know what you think the biggest shift that you've seen in how email providers are policing traffic this year compared to in years past.
Yeah, that was a huge one. And that, I think, came about, I want to say it might even be like 2 years now. It feels really, again, it's one of those where it feels more recent than that, but I think that's been around for about 2 years now. Maybe going on, maybe 2026 will be 2 years. Anyway, that was a big shift. Certainly, I think what had always been the case before is you knew that inbox providers were regularly changing not the rules so much, but their algorithms, so that, all of a sudden, one day, in theory, your mail that had been getting delivered and hitting inboxes, all of a sudden was all going to the spam filter. And as a mailer, you'd be like, what just happened? I didn't change anything. Like, and it wasn't like you didn't make a mistake, but just something changed in that algorithm, that black box behind the scenes, that the inbox provider changed their rules to, in their minds, make their users' lives easier, improve that user experience in the inbox. And they don't announce those, they don't let mailers know, hey, by the way, don't do this anymore, or there's going to be penalties. It was typically just things happened. And then mailers would scramble and spend the next 3-6 months understanding the new rules that, again, were never really explained. And they'd eventually kind of figure out, okay, through trial and error and testing, okay, this works, and now I'm back in the inbox again. And I think the big shift when Gmail and Yahoo actually came out and announced and said, okay, we're going to create a list of sender requirements for bulk senders. If you're sending 5,000 plus emails a day into Gmail or Yahoo, these are rules that we want you to follow. And if you don't follow them, we're not going to guarantee you're going to get anywhere near the inbox. We may just send you all the spam. You just may not get delivered at all. But the good thing was they said specifically, like, okay, again, as you said, spam threshold. We don't want to see your spam complaints get above, that's what, 0.03% or 0.3%. And obviously they want you to follow all the typical compliance rules as set forth by the federal government, can spam. So dealing with unsubscribes, all those things, you need to do that. But then they also want you to do domain authentication and essentially, prove to them that you're a safe sender. Do some of those steps that were always best practices, but not required. And the good thing about that, again, it was a shift, but at least in this case, mailers knew what the change was. And so I was like, okay, give me rules and I'll follow those. And I think that was a shift in the way that relationship has worked. I think it's probably to everybody's benefit. If the inbox providers want mailers to adhere to certain standards, well, tell them what they are. Don't just change your rules behind the scenes and then expect people to eventually kind of figure it out. I think that's very tricky. So I like the transparency of it, even though, again, it was a bit of an upheaval for a lot of mailers and created a lot of challenges. But I bet if you talk to most of them, they much prefer that, they at least like tell me. And so I think that was a big shift. So I would imagine we're going to see more of that. It's not like now Gmail and Yahoo are done. They're never going to change those requirements again. They'll undoubtedly tweak them, look at how this is performed, make decisions again about how to improve that inbox experience. But I think maybe this sets a precedent that hopefully they'll announce those to the industry and say, hey, now we want you to do this. And this, again, is going to show us that, you're doing things the right way, or at least the way that they want you to. And that will lead to you be more likely to get your email delivered. So if that shift continues, I think that's just good for the industry in general.
Yeah, for sure. It would be nice if like the Yahoos and the Gmails of the world would say, hey, in 6 months, we're making this change. And so you could prepare instead.
Right. And they essentially did this last time. And before they announced the guidelines, and they actually, if I remember correctly, they bumped the date back a little bit because there was a lot of wait a minute.
Yeah.
So I think they were learning how to maybe roll something like that out, and and again, how to have a little more interaction with the industry, which I think is all positive. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that continues to evolve. But I hope that more of an open dialogue, or just more transparency in the rules they want mailers to follow will become I think that will be good, and that's going to extend to other inbox providers as well. I know Microsoft has eventually came out with their own sets of standards, very similar. So I would imagine all the big inbox providers will kind of follow suit, and hopefully, in a best case scenario, they all have kind of the same standards, so that mailers don't get into a situation where, okay, I have to follow these rules for Gmail, these ones for Yahoo, these ones for Microsoft, for maybe a smaller one over here, because that gets really complicated and almost starts to sound like the early days of email before canned spam came into place, where every state had its own email laws that were sometimes following one meant you weren't compliant with another. And that obviously starts to become just an incredible challenge, if not almost an impossible challenge. So hopefully we see a little more consolidation. I think that'd be good for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I do want to jump into suppression management. Are you able to explain the mechanics of how poor suppression management directly impacts the bottom line, specifically thinking about how quickly ISPs can shut down sending volume?
Yeah, I mean, again, at the most foundational level, you're dealing with a suppression file of unsubscribes. And if you screw up that process somehow and mail people who've unsubscribed, the inbox providers are going to figure it out. And if they notice that, that is a great way to obviously get shut down. Your certainly your sender reputation goes through the floor, and you may just get blocked. And again, doesn't even account for the potential legal issues that you've exposed yourself to, but just the inbox and getting delivered. That kind of basic step, you can absolutely shoot yourself in the foot there. But it also, it's everything. Again, if you are not cleansing your list, and let's say you've got some just bad data in there, and email addresses that are malformed, or inboxes that don't exist anymore, and you just keep mailing to them, that's not, these are all things that the inbox providers, the ISPs, are looking for as a bad practice, and they're reasons to not deliver mail from a certain sender. So those, if you are getting a little lax with how your data hygiene, that can absolutely lead to significant problems in deliverability, and relatively quickly too. I mean, if that problem is notable, or if it spikes suddenly, there's good likelihood ISPs are noticing it. It's just a matter of how quickly they decide to react to it, and it could be pretty fast.
Yeah. And when we're talking about reputation as an emailer, that is actually like your most valuable asset, I would say. And so if you have things that are deemed suspicious, and you're constantly being blocked, like it's just a bad party all the way around. And, to have even the links like inside your emails being flagged as suspicious, like your entire email campaign can fail.
Absolutely.
And I think this is one of the problems that Everflow is trying to solve with our new product called Traffic Health, which essentially like directly addresses your protecting your emailer and domain reputation by preventing that spam and ISP blocking. Essentially, Traffic Health is able to detect if your tracking domains have been blacklisted using really powerful tools like Google Threat Intelligence, Hetrix tool, and even EasyList to just make sure that your emails are reaching the people you want them to reach and they're not being flagged as suspicious or spam. And then keeping that good relationship with the ISPs and carriers. And, with Traffic Health, we actually launched it earlier this year. And for this fireside chat, specifically for all participants, we are actually running a special promo for you guys where you can get all the premium features, which includes, again, Google Threat Intelligence, which is a great tool just on its own, but having it linked with everything else makes it just doubly powerful. You get Hetrix tools, you're able to see the health of your domains and exactly which list you're actually being blocked on, so you can be more proactive versus reactive. So for the premium features, we're actually running it for $500 a month, and that is with one domain, and then $7.99 a month for up to 10 domains. So we're not charging per domain, we're giving you guys a flat platform fee. Again, that's $500 for one domain and $7.99 a month for up to 10 domains. So get Traffic Health now and just make sure that your reputation remains safe. So jumping back in, you were talking about basic opt-outs and unsubscribes. Are there, beyond just handling those opt-outs, are there any data hygiene secrets that really separate affiliates who can scale volume effectively from the ones that get throttled? And what exactly does a rigorous list health look like on just a day-to-day basis?
Sure. Yeah. Again, we kind of talked about the table stakes, and I'd really say that base level is just unsubscribes. You have to cleanse that. Like those can't be in your list. And fortunately, there are mechanisms, obviously like Optismo, but built into many ESPs, a lot of this is essentially taken care of. You can set it up in a fairly automated fashion, and you don't have to think about it too much if you don't want to. And you should remain relatively safe. Eyeballing it every once in a while, because never assume your compliance is just 100%. I think it demands a review at least once a year anyway. But so thoughts for next year, review your compliance program. But that's kind of table stakes. But then maybe one step up from that is just validating, verifying your list data. Again, is it mailable? Do you have email addresses in there that are malformed, or that again are going to dead inboxes? Like again, you've got we all know how quickly certainly work email addresses recycle. People leave companies, go to a new place, all of a sudden that email address doesn't even receive anywhere. That inbox is gone. And if you continually mail to that, you're going to get penalized for it. So cleansing against all those things, verifying that those email addresses are real, that they're going to a live inbox, hopefully a live person. Those are all key steps. But then take it even kind of a step up into the more advanced kind of things is really look at what's going on with your performance, your engagement. And are you mailing to people who they've been on your list for 5 years and they've never clicked, never opened, never done anything, and you just keep mailing every single time? That may not be the best strategy. There's an interesting argument there. I know plenty of folks in the email space who will argue, you never take an email address off your list if you don't have to, because there's always a chance, it's long tail, and maybe someday down the road, they haven't been opening your email, but they will, and they'll buy something or, click on a link, whatever. But there comes a point where at a minimum, push those really incredibly inactive emails off into a separate list that you maybe don't mail as often, and those become specific campaigns of trying to reactivate those kind of things. But it really comes down to, and there's no like hard and fast rule of what to do with this kind of deep dive. It depends on your data and your engagement as a mailer, and everybody's going to be different. And so, setting a rule of, somebody should be inactive if they haven't clicked on something in 6 months. Well, maybe you're a really seasonal mailer and it's, Christmas. And so That's your big time, and you're going to do 90% of your sales over Christmas. Well, okay, 6 months from now, nobody's clicked on anything because you're selling Christmas, items. But so you shouldn't cleanse all of those non-responders off your list before next Christmas, or you won't have a business. So it does really depend on, your sales cycle, all of the different things about your business. So, but I think, these are all kind of key things that it's easy to make mistakes with, but it's all the kind of thing that if you spend the time to dive into your data and really make sure you're using your data in the best possible way, the most advantageous to your business, it's definitely to your benefit.
Yeah. So it's not as straightforward as saying we recommend reviewing your list every week or whatever. It's really just finding your personal sweet spot and how that fits with your business.
It really is. Again, there are certain things that you could say, like I said, I could say, yeah, certainly on a yearly basis, evaluate your compliance program, and just make sure.
Every year.
Yeah. Okay, canned spam doesn't change typically in a material way from one year to the next. They make minor tweaks to it every so often, every handful of years, the fines go up, but for the most part, and maybe they'll fine tune some language, but the basics of it don't change typically. But you will find that state level regulations will change and something new can come up. There's a California business code. I can't remember which one it is particularly, but it has come up in the last couple of years and has caught a decent number of mailers because it involves flagging things where a sending domain is masked, for example. If you use privacy protection on some of the domains involved in your email send, that can be against the law based on this business code, and you can get fined for it. And in some cases of things like this, there can be even a right of private action. So all of a sudden you're getting letters from lawyers many businesses, you think of, domain privacy protection. That's not a strange thing. That's, maybe it can be seen certainly as, oh, you're trying to obfuscate who you are. And that's obviously what they're after, I believe. But plenty of businesses do that just because, well, it's, kind of standard when we buy a domain that we add privacy protection. We don't really even think about it. There's no nefarious intentions behind it. It's just business. And so this is a case where you can very inadvertently be doing something that is against this business code, and you're not really trying to do anything that's wrong per se. But if you're not aware of it, you may find yourself in trouble. So when I say do that compliance, review at least once a year, I think it's to capture those kind of things. Like, talk to your attorney. They'll know when a new law has come to pass in Massachusetts or California or wherever, that all of a sudden it's like, hey, you should be aware of this because you may need to change something of how you're doing your business.
Yeah, and you had mentioned earlier in the conversation how it's really important to stay up to date on what's happening in the industry, and I think that goes hand in hand with this.
100%.
Yeah. Okay, so we do have obviously in our title talking about 2026. So I do want to touch on that a little bit. If you're looking ahead to next year, I can't believe it's 2026 already, basically, which is crazy.
It is.
But if you had to make one bold prediction about how inbox providers will evolve their standards, again, just what we've been talking about, right? What do you think is coming next for us?
Boy,
like able to see like stricter thresholds or maybe like new types of engagement metrics beyond like what is currently standard?
Yeah, it's a great question. And of course, it being a forecast of the future, like we don't know, sadly, there's no way to know. We talk about like, how can I future proof my email program? I can give you suggestions, but there's no way to be sure because again, I'm sure one thing I am sure of is that the, Gmail and Yahoo and Microsoft and all the ISPs, they're having conversations about what's next. Like, hey, what are we going to change in 2026 or just in the future that will, again, impact the way email is, filtered, identified as spam or not spam, decide what inbox it goes to, or what even, at a more base level, what changes are they going to make to their inboxes in general that maybe change the way that you as a user see the email. There was a big deal when Gmail, kind of had their categorized tabs, and it was like, okay, you've got your main inbox, you've got promotions, and you got social. And that was a big change. And I don't think they were telling anybody when that was coming. It just, that became a thing. So I would imagine, I mean, without getting specific, I think we're going to clearly see more of probably both of those things. I think we'll see changes to the user experience in the inbox that the inbox providers hope will lead to more engaged users and people who are happier with their email experience. But I'd also imagine that having now, having set this new set of standards for bulk senders that again will have been in place, I think, for 2 years next year. I'm sure they're going to revisit that, and determine, okay, this was positive. I'm assuming that would be, that when they look at it, they'll be like, this was good, but what else can we do? How? Because I'm sure they're not going to come out of going, we fixed email is perfect now. Like users are happy. They love all the marketing email that that gets into their promotions tab, whatever. Everyone loves the whole email experience. So I'm sure that's not going to be the case. So my guess is they'll continue to become more stringent, but like specifically how, I wouldn't try to guess. Of course, I'm just going to make it the blanket statement of AI will get involved in that somehow. I know one thing, and this isn't a sender requirement, but it'll impact senders, is, and I believe it's Gmail has started playing with AI in terms of creating a synopsis or a summary of what's in the email. Whereas email marketers are used to having preview text that's going to show up in the inbox if a user has that turned on. So you'll see whatever they want to see, or if you haven't bothered with preview text, they're going to see the first lines of the email. But if AI comes into play, that's going to decide, oh, we read the email and this is what it's about. That could get a little dicey. I mean, if an email is very straightforward, you'd think AI will probably be pretty good at summarizing it. But, marketers, we like to be creative. I could see, what if you're using humor, in your email, or, it's just a little, you're being clever. Will AI pick that up, or will then you end up with a really confusing and strange AI summary? And worst case, and this is where I think it gets interesting and from a legal standpoint, is, well, what if that AI summary ends up being kind of deceptive to a consumer, confusing as to what's really in the email, just because of the way you're using marketing speak and you're maybe having fun with the content? Does that start to run you afoul of anything involving canned spam in some way? Where it's like, now that you didn't write it, but AI's determined that this is confusing. There just gets you get into this deceptive content arena where I could see that just becoming sticky, and certainly attorneys on the anti-spam side could want to use that as a way to litigate. I could certainly see those kind of possibilities, get some test cases in there. But the thing is, it's all new frontier, and I just don't think we know.
Yeah, the AI conversation is really interesting. As you were explaining that, it made me think of two things. The first one, when you mentioned how AI not being able to pick up on human humor and things like that, it makes me think of how, when you search on something on Google, it gives you the AI suggestions and summaries. And sometimes it will cite reviews of people being sarcastic, but it will note it as it being a negative sentiment. And so, like you were saying, if we're using AI to determine what is considered spam, would it be able to decipher between the different emotions of humans? But then also, on top of that, if email marketers then start to use AI to build their messaging, and we also have AI trying to moderate that, machines judging machines, where does that go?
As I say, is it at that point, is it AI marketing to AI? I don't even know.
Yeah.
I don't know how that works.
Yeah. So and I also am thinking about with Yahoo spam threshold being at 0.3%, do we see that number going up at all? If they say,
boy, I mean, again, I could only imagine that number. Really, I could see it going down. This is just my opinion. I mean, again, I have no basis for it beyond just my own kind of gut feel. I would think that because I know just talking to mailers, when this was all kind of coming out, and they were all discussing how they were going to adapt to it, I didn't hear too many notable mailers, people who really knew what they were doing and they're good at it, and they've been successful for a period of time. They weren't too concerned about the spam threshold. I think most of them felt like, no, we're not, like, are they sending spam? I mean, that gets into the whole thing of what is spam, which is, we could talk about that for an hour, because it's really in the eye of the beholder.
Right.
You think you're sending and are potentially sending an incredibly valuable email, but if it comes to me and I'm just not interested at that time and I mark it as spam, well, it's spam. It doesn't matter. Like, it almost is irrelevant what you sent at that point because I've marked it that way. So I think, mailers saw that as, but not the biggest challenge of what those new requirements were necessarily. So I would think if the concept is, hey, we're going to keep making it more stringent, and so the user experience, again, if that's really the focus, is going to get better, well, maybe we tighten that spam complaint rate even more. Maybe it becomes 0.2%, and you can't go beyond that, or we're not going to guarantee deliverability. I would think that would make more sense than it going higher per se.
Yeah. Nice. So as we kind of reflect on this great conversation that we've had, this has been awesome. And, we're coming to the end of the year. Everyone's thinking about Q1 strategy, things like that. And I know you say it's just your gut feeling, your prediction. I think I was hoping you would have like breaking news.
Letting you down again. Sorry.
We'll have to get you in those rooms. So next time you come on, you could just spill all the news from us. But as we start looking at like strategy for Q1, what would you recommend for our listeners and our guests? Maybe like the first action or audit that they take within their email list to just give them the best 2026 that they can have.
Sure. Well, it sounds like a broken record, but I'll say, hey, start your year off with a compliance review. Why not? Let's it's a good time to do it because, one, depending on your business, if you got a really seasonable business, it can be very busy. But for a lot of people, things get a little quiet toward the holidays. It's kind of like what's done is done. Not a bad time to dig into those kind of things that feel like not part of your day-to-day business. They're going to be a little time consuming. So I think getting that done maybe at the end of this year to kick into next year is a great place to start. But barring that, I think just, looking, one of the other things that certainly has been a hot button topic for years now is data privacy. And, we've got 20 plus states in the United States that have their own very specific data privacy laws that, again, sometimes agree with each other, sometimes don't, but typically they're all very focused on if you are, how you collect data as a company, as a business, and then how you use that data to market or do whatever it is you're going to do. And the typical stance on that is if you're collecting data, you better have a good reason for it. And if you're storing it and using it, it better be secure, and you better have a clear understanding of what you're doing with it. And if it's PII, well, then, yeah, you've got a whole bunch of other standards that you better adhere to. So I think it is very smart for marketers, email and every other channel, to take time at the beginning of the year and really look at their data practices. And if you are collecting data, make sure you're using it for something. Like, there's a reason. There were way back in the day, before any of these data privacy discussions came up, again, back to 2000 or whenever, I was of the mind as a marketer that, boy, if I could, whatever data you can collect sounds great. If we can just store it, because who knows if it might be useful. Collecting somebody's shoe size, we don't sell shoes, but maybe someday we'll have something that might be useful. And shame on us if we had it or could have collected it and didn't. We'd regret it. Yeah. So I think there was a sense of data collection maximization or whatever back in the day. Not so, that's definitely not the case now. Now it's really like, well, one, it's expensive to store it anyway. So, and then you add in all of the potential, liability issues. Like, well, if you're collecting it, make sure there's a reason, and in fact, if you determine, well, we've got all this data that we're not doing anything with, well, then maybe you don't need that data anymore, and maybe you shouldn't be collecting it, and maybe you should delete what you have, because that will be helpful to you under GDPR and, every data protection law, that's out there. So I think taking a look at that, and then again, the data you do have, use it. If it's there and you've been collecting it and you've got a valid reason to have it, well, how can you leverage it to better engage with your audience? Because at the end of the day, that's all that it's for, is the more you understand your audience by the data you have, the better you can create a message that will connect with them. It's the whole, right message at the right time to the right person, or however, whatever order you want to put those in. But it lets you do that. So I think really digging into what you've got on hand already, and then looking at ways to make sure you are strategically implementing that and just driving the most value out of your database.
Yeah. Great, Tom. This has been amazing. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me and share all of the knowledge that you have. I do want to give you the floor to say anything you want. What's going on with Optismo these days? If you have anything to promote, the floor is yours.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, Optismo, I've been with the company for, again, going on 9 years now, but the company's been around for, it will be 17 years next year. So we have been around for a minute, and we're well established as the leaders in suppressionless management. I think it's, we feel very proud of the fact that we've really become that recognized thought leader voice and business leader in our, admittedly not a huge, it's not a huge business. It's a very small part of the overall marketing ecosystem that we exist in, but we're really good at what we do. And we have a bunch of fantastic people. We didn't really talk much about, companies and stuff. I know, Everflow, similarly, you guys have grown incredibly over a relatively short period of time. But I think building a great team is always a key to, having a successful company. And that's been an extreme focus for us from day one. And again, I know, kudos to you guys for focusing on the same things. I strongly believe. But as far as the future, we'll continue to always have that foundation in compliance. That's our bread and butter. But yeah, we also want to, grow into some new areas, and we've got new products that are in beta right now that will actually work for the mailing side of the community, where our clients in the past have typically been the brands and the networks, but all the mailers use our system and know us very well because that's where they access suppression data. Well, we're going to have a platform that will help mailers with their day-to-day and streamline their deployment and make compliance an even simpler task for them to manage on a day-to-day basis. So that product is in beta right now, and will be coming soon. If folks want to come up and see us in Las Vegas at Affiliate Summit, we'll have a table at the meat market. Come get a demo, see where we are. You want to join we have a wait list for folks who want to be first in line when it becomes publicly available, or as we add more companies to the beta. Love to have you on the wait list. You'll get to see it as we build it, because we're really taking kind of a build it in public approach. So it's a chance for folks to see a new product as it evolves before it even comes to market, and provide input on things they'd like to see in it, and hopefully we can take that input into consideration as we build it. So exciting times for the Optismo crew, for sure.
Yeah, it all sounds really great. We're always rooting for you guys, so very, very excited for what you guys have in store for next year and beyond. Tom, thank you again for joining us today. I don't see any questions in the chat, so I think we can just end it out here. Thank you for your time, and yeah, this has been great. So I appreciate it, and I hope you are able to stay warm the rest of the week and you have a good weekend.
Thanks, Kristen. This is great.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care, everybody.